lecture was given by T. Colin Campbell, Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry at Cornell University.
I started out, as you heard this morning, basically from the farm and came from that background and was focused primarily on the idea that we all need to get more protein, and we particularly needed to get more animal protein especially.
He spoke about the China study, which is considered the most comprehensive study of nutrition ever conducted. This 20-year project examined the relationship between diet and disease in one of the few areas in the world where people still consume a mostly plant-based diet. He teamed up with Chinese and British researchers who went into 65 counties in rural China and found out what 6,500 people ate and how they lived.
But it turns out that as soon as a little animal food started creeping in the diet in some counties, you know, blood cholesterol levels started going up, cancer started to appear, heart disease eventually began to appear.
Since the beginning of Dr. Campbell's research, the connection between meat and dairy consumption and disease has been confirmed over and over again in scientific studies and even studies of studies. Diabetes is a disease that more and more people have to worry about. Fortunately, studies have shown that a healthy, low-fat vegan diet can prevent diabetes and even treat it better than the American Diabetic Association diet and common medications. The two strongest cancer links are the ones between prostate cancer and dairy consumption, and colon cancer and red and processed meats. Finally, vegans have a 26% lower chance of dying from America's #1 killer, heart disease. That's because they avoid meat and dairy, which contain artery-clogging saturated fat and cholesterol. The science on plant-based diets is overwhelming and has led the nation's largest organization of food and nutrition professionals to state, appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including total vegetarian or vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. But the American Dietetic Association doesn't determine government nutrition recommendations. The government has its own committees to determine the official nutrition policy for the country.
So what they choose to say, you know, is very, very important. They're translating the science into public policy. It's very important that the people on those committees really be objective. In the days when I was involved, the chair people of those committees were good, they were objective, and oftentimes outside of our community. They didn't have any conflict of interest. Now, in the two of the most recent committees, the Food and Nutrition Board that sets the nutrient recommendations, and also the Dietary Guidelines Committee, in one case it was chaired simultaneously by the same individual, who happens to be a major consultant for the dairy industry. And so under those circumstances, you're going to have a committee that's really biased, seriously biased. And so, for example, when it came out last time, increasing milk consumption from 2 glasses a day to 3 glasses a day, that's why it happens.
As a practicing Christian, Tesla was drawn to the Christian Vegetarian Association table.
But like my mom's argument and my brother's argument was always, God said that he put animals on earth for us to eat.
The way I look at it is, you know, if you take a look at Genesis in the first chapter, it describes how God actually prescribed for everybody, people and animals, a vegetarian diet. It wasn't until after the fall that people started to eat animals. So at least the way I see it is the original intention and the ideal as described in Genesis 1, Garden of Eden, was a vegetarian world. There are some people, for example, who need to eat meat just to survive. And those people who do eat meat should certainly not be condemned. But if we have a choice, then the choice that I think is going to be more compassionate and more consistent with what the Bible is trying to teach us about is going to be a diet that's going to be plant-based. It's going to be a vegetarian diet.
Hi, how are you?
We met up with former cattle rancher Howard Lyman, who turned his family's small organic farm into a giant feedlot operation. He witnessed firsthand how factory farming destroyed his land, and over time, as he opened his eyes to the truth, became a vegan advocate. He claims that by demanding so many animal foods, we are literally forking the environment.
We're digging more graves with our fork than anything else, and it's not just our grave. We're digging the grave of the future. We're destroying the planet.
Howard's lecture was about an hour long. But it doesn't take an hour to understand the basic problem. The demand for animal foods is getting higher and higher every year, but producing them is extremely inefficient and polluting. In November of 2006, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization published a report identifying the livestock sector as one of the top contributors to the most serious environmental problems. According to the report, farm animals contribute more to global warming than the entire transportation sector. How can this be? For one thing, animal protein production releases much more carbon dioxide than plant protein production. See, first you've got to grow and harvest the feed grains, then transport them to the farms where the animals are. You need energy to operate those farms, then to transport the animals to the slaughterhouse. Of course, you have to operate the slaughterhouses, and finally, you have to process and store the animal flesh. On top of that, farmed animals also produce methane when they burp, fart, and breathe. Methane is 23 times stronger than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere, according to the EPA. Now add to this the fact that we've cleared 70% of forests in the Amazon and elsewhere for cattle grazing and cattle feed. The good news is that switching from the standard American diet to a vegan one for 1 year would reduce your carbon dioxide emissions more than switching from a normal car to a hybrid. In 2008, the top man of the world's most important international agency dealing with climate change finally came out and said, "Please eat less meat. Meat is a very carbon-intensive commodity."
Never have we had less clean water than what we have today.
In order to get 1 pound of beef, you have to feed a steer 6 to 10 pounds of grain, which also means that much more water is used because you have to irrigate all that grain. And cows drink 50 gallons of water or more per day. But it's not just what goes into the farm animals that's a problem. It's also what comes out. For example, hogs in North Carolina produce 10 times more fecal waste than people do in North Carolina each day. And all that poo has to go somewhere. Often it's stored in huge open-air sewage pits called lagoons. As these fill up, the waste is sprayed onto fields. Unfortunately, the lagoons are prone to leaks and spills, and waste from sprayed fields runs into lakes and streams and contaminates groundwater.
Never in the history of the world have we ever had fewer fish than what we have today.
A 2006 study reported in the journal Science claims that a third of the ocean's species are already in collapse. And if current trends continue, by 2048, all the ocean species will be in collapse. In the same way that we've industrialized land animal farming, we've also industrialized fishing. You've got huge nets that are acres wide, lines with hooks that can be 50 miles long, and tons of gear dragging along the ocean floor, obliterating coral and flattening natural landscape that provides essential habitat for many species. Unfortunately, they snag non-target species too. Fishermen discard about 25% of what they catch worldwide, according to U.S. News and World Report. Of the ocean fish that are kept, a percentage ends up in fish farms as feed. For every pound of farmed fish produced worldwide, several pounds of marine life may have to be caught and killed. Right now, the world population is 6.7 billion. By 2050, the population will reach over 9 billion, according to the United Nations. If everyone adopted a vegetarian diet and no food were wasted, current food production would theoretically feed 10 billion people. That's what the Population Reference Bureau says anyway. Unfortunately, the trend in the developing world, where most of our population growth comes from, is to eat more like Americans. That means more meat and more dairy. You might have heard the statistic that says, if the whole world lived at consumption levels of Americans, we'd need 3 to 5 more planet Earths.
I just revel in the fact that I am able to come here and spend time with people that have the opportunity to change the world. And from the bottom of my heart, I will tell you, we need to change the world, or our society as we know it will not survive.